Someone recently asked me the question, what is the difference, especially as someone who, like me, does come from a coaching background in the past? What is the difference between the kinds of questions that you ask in advanced conversational hypnosis with the hypnotic interview questions from traditional coaching questions? And I want to shout out this website that I found. It's called heartcoachinstitute.com. They have a blog post called 100 Powerful Coaching Questions. And I gave this a quick glance through. I'm mainly going to be reacting this and explaining live some of the differences between an ACH hypnotic interview approach to asking questions and a traditional coaching approach to asking questions, kind of showing you what they do, showing you what we do. And I do want to shout them out though. This does seem like a great list of questions for the most part. There are some differences in how I'd approach it and apply it, but overall, this looks like a solid company, a solid blog post. And I want to highlight a couple of things initially. Right here, it says, remember your job is to help your client think rather than think for your client. I absolutely agree with that. They give great principles here as well that you want to generate curiosity, stimulate reflective conversation and thought, surface underlying assumptions. All of these things are exactly correct. And so the philosophy behind coaching questions and ACH questions, there is a lot of overlap there. I also appreciate this disclaimer about what a good question is not. It's not a statement disguised as a question, like this one. Have you tried working from home 1 day per week to give yourself more time for strategic thinking? That technically is a question, but you're basically just telling them this is the right answer. It's a suggestion, not a question. So you want to ask genuine questions. I agree with them on that as well. I agree with them about silence being important. And so those are some of the areas that I agree with. Where I might disagree or start to disagree is with some of the specific questions that they ask. So, for example, with circular questioning, they say that the goal of these questions is to get your client to think about something from a new point of view. How would your partner answer this question? How does this behavior look from the perspective of your husband or your wife? Why did your friend react as she did and not like you expected her to do? These aren't bad questions. What I see as potentially problematic with these questions, though, is that I want to understand what is going on inside my client's mind. I want to understand the problem that they're coming to me with, and I want to untie the knots related to that. Now, getting them outside of their perspective temporarily could help loosen things and help them see that the way that they're seeing things might not be the absolute truth. But if the idea is, well, if they say this and the other person says this, then why are you still stuck with what you believe? And oftentimes that's just kind of circling the symptom. We want to figure out what are the mechanics, what is the unconscious payoff that's actually going on underneath these questions. And so with this, I would rate it kind of like a B plus. Like they're good questions. It might just be slightly trying to do something, trying to force a perspective. But let's look at a couple more questions. They list these as hypothetical coaching questions, and they highlight both the pros and the cons, in my opinion, very well right here. They said that these are designed to be future oriented and to give the client the option to think about a different point of view and new solutions. I think the key word, both good and bad, is solutions. Because listen to these questions. What would you need to do if you want to accomplish this goal faster? What are you trying to do? You're trying to get them to think of a solution. What if you could come up with solutions of what to do? How would you solve this problem if time was not an issue? What would your partner do if you put this plan into practice? What if you don't solve this problem within 6 months? What are the consequences? I like that last question just to get them to take it seriously, but I feel like that's more important in a sales context. But if someone already is your client, they understand the consequences of their problem. And so for a coaching question, I don't really see that value of that. It's really more of a sales question. And then for these other four, you're basically asking them to pretend. What if you could come up with solutions of what to do? Anything that they give you at that point after asking that question is kind of just a guess because you're trying to force them to have an answer or a solution. Within advanced conversational hypnosis, the idea is to really take all of the pressure off of fixing it and just focus on exploring the actual nature of the problem. And so this is hands down the biggest question between traditional coaching questions and ACH questions. With the hypnotic interview, you're interviewing the problem, whereas coaching questions are trying to guide people toward the solution. So it's whether or not they're solution oriented or problem oriented. And it might sound weird to say that, why is ACH problem oriented? Why do you want them focused on the problem? It's because somewhere within the problem, we can understand the logic that their unconscious mind is using to hold on to the problem. And if we don't change that, it doesn't matter how good of a solution we give them. the unconscious mind will prefer its solution until you can actually understand what it really is. They have another category of questions called miracle questions. These are, again, focused on the future, and it's kind of getting them to be inspired, moving past hopelessness. So, asking, what if this problem could disappear from one day to another? How would the following day look without this problem? Really getting them to imagine, what is life like beyond this? And this is a powerful set of questions. These fall more into master's level questions, Masters of Advanced Conversational Hypnosis, or MAC. And the value of this is it really does start to force the client's mind to imagine something new, which brings up the hidden knots. That is the value of them. It's not because by getting them into this mindset, you're going to then have them just completely forget about their problem altogether. But what you're doing is you're creating enough motivation that it's forcing the unconscious mind to say, fine, here is the real reason why I'm holding on to it. I guess I do want this glorious future beyond this problem, but here's the reason why I'm not willing to give the problem up yet. That is the value. And so if that's how this coaching company is teaching it, great. Most people don't really think of problems and unconscious payoff the way that we do with an ACH, so I doubt that they are, but they have a definite value to ask these motivation style questions. Another set of questions that they recommend is self-inquiry questions. And I like the idea of where they're headed. I just think that they push a little bit too hard. So these are designed to get them to be introspective. So they ask, how do you feel you could best motivate yourself? Or what are the best ways for you to support yourself at this point? I get where they're headed, but again, it's too solution oriented. An ACH style question would be more along the lines of, what things have you wondered about regarding this problem? Or why do you think that you have this problem and other people don't? You're getting them to be curious. And that is the other overarching difference between coaching questions and ACH questions. The first big category is whether it's problem focused or solution focused, with ACH being problem focused, coaching being solution focused. The other big difference is that ACH is curiosity focused rather than outcome focused. So, for example, if you couldn't fail, what would you do? That doesn't really get us closer to understanding the nature of the problem. Now, clarifying questions, these are all perfect. I would give these an A+. What's the real challenge here for you? What do you mean by that? How do you feel about this? What would you like to see happen? Describe your ideal outcome. Those are all perfect questions, in my opinion, because you want to get real clarity about what's going on. Same thing here. What matters to you most concerning this? At this point, what's happening now? Even questions like, what do you want? Are great open-ended questions within ACH. But then, on the other hand, tell me about the resources that would be helpful. You're just telling them to fix the problem. And the unconscious mind doesn't like being told what to do that directly. I agree with the idea of having summarizing questions to kind of reinforce learning of the session. But the biggest difference here is that with these questions, you can tell, what did you learn about yourself today? What did you learn about your situation? What are you taking away from this conversation? What were your most powerful insights today? Can you summarize what you gained today? These are all very consciously steered. What we do within ACH that's different is we have the processing chat where we're trying to get them to understand how these lessons integrate at a much deeper level, but that is entirely unconscious. So we're telling them what to expect, which is that there's going to be highs and lows, that they're going to keep trying on different mental configurations of not just the problem, but their entire life. It is kind of like a post-hypnotic suggestion, but it is stretched out as far as possible, trying to get their unconscious to keep on thinking about all of the different things that we talked about today. And so we're encouraging an unconscious process, an unconscious summarizing, not just summarizing it in the session, but keep summarizing it well beyond it as well. And then we do tasking questions, which is in a way similar to these encouraging accountability questions, but the real intent is very different. So like this question right here, what are some concrete steps you could take to achieve this goal? That sounds very similar to a standard question that we ask in ACH, which is, what is the smallest thing that you could do based on everything we talked about that would have the biggest impact on everything we discussed? That sounds like we're trying to get them to take concrete steps. What we're actually trying to do is just occupy their conscious mind. Because after a very transformative ACH session, people want something to do with it all. They feel kind of empty or weird just trusting their unconscious completely. And so what we're doing is we're intentionally giving them a very, very, very small task they can focus on, and it's kind of just a distraction. And so if you're one of my current one-on-one clients, please don't listen to this, but whatever we discussed at the end as a practical next step for you was kind of BS. It was kind of just designed to get your unconscious mind freedom to focus on it by sending your conscious mind out into a different room. We're separating the two so that the unconscious mind can keep doing the real work. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of difference. And even in the areas that look similar, some of the underlying principles are very different between coaching and ACH.